Hi, I'm Mark Hilmer. I'm a professor at Christ School of Theology, and I teach Bible. I've done that for the years that it's been in existence, and I'm happy and proud to say so. Well, I think pivotal was a Fulbright year that I was awarded for Heidelberg University in Germany, and that really lit my fire because that showed me a different way of reading scripture, and I pursued that. So then I came back and went to seminary, and after seminary, I I just followed one thing after the other. Well, first of all, I got an opportunity to teach at Lutheran college, and I wanted to go out east. So I just applied to all of the Lutheran colleges out east. And there was this little place I hadn't heard of before, Thiel College, Thiel, Thiel College in Greenville, Pennsylvania, very western part of the state, and had a nice time there and was going to stay there. But then I got a call to an interview at what was then Northwestern Theological Seminary, a member of the Minnesota Synod of the LCA, and I flew out to interview, and then it was a nice interview, but then I turned it down. And then I kept bringing it up, and my wife said, "Are you sure you don't want to do that?" Well, as a matter of fact, that was one of the few places where they pay you to teach Hebrew. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll call them up. So I called them back and I said, is it still open? And they said, yes, it is. And so I said, I'll take it. I'll take the job. Yeah, my primary field, if you measure it by what I enjoy doing more than anything else, is teaching Hebrew. I get really worked up, whether it's beginning Hebrew or advanced Hebrew. I just feel very comfortable. I used to joke about it. I said, that's the one class that nobody disagrees with me. They said, okay, yeah, just teach. And so I did that. And that still is the case. But I do cover the Old Testament, and I teach the second part of the Old Testament, although I offer electives specializing in Psalms and Isaiah. Why did I get into Old Testament? Well, it's a very clear answer. It kind of shows my ignorance at the time that I thought, well, the basis of everything is the Old Testament. So I'll major in the Old Testament in that language. And when I get done with that, I'll study the New Testament. And after that, church history. And after that, systematic theology. Well, I never got beyond the first step. I never got beyond the Old Testament, even though the other fields, of course, are very important. But I suppose the farther you get from the Old Testament, the less command I have of that doctrine, which would say that I understand the New Testament quite well, and I'm completely in love with the history of the church. But, well, I just saw that that was basic to the entire Christian proclamation. So I majored in Hebrew and found schools that brought me along. Like at the University of Wisconsin, I was introduced to Arabic and Syriac and Aramaic, and I continue with those courses, although at a smaller school, there's very little call for Syriac, even though it's a Christian language. The Syriac being the Christian form of the Aramaic. So, well, by far, I find myself animated after I teach 1 or 2 or 3 hours of Hebrew. I just I'm in my element, and what I've learned, and I've done it here uh, over against the seminaries that I've taught with in the past. I I have them memorize biblical passages. So Genesis 1, 1 to 3, the Song of Miriam, Exodus 15:21, and Leviticus 19:18, love your neighbor, just the classical positions. And so when they finish even just basic Hebrew, they have memorized and can recall. And because if you're going to memorize something in something like a foreign language, that kind of sticks in a way. It kind of sticks. So they get an exposure to the theory of Hebrew, but also the very classical approach, and that's through memorization. Well, definitely it is my bread, and it's my bread and water, my wine and everything. That's the way I serve God. Now I reached the age of 70 and retired from my one seminary. And little did I know that I would be teaching. Now I'm going to be in my upper 80s pretty soon. And it's just a big part of my life. Oh yeah, I wouldn't mind doing cruises around the world and doing stuff like that. Although I have been to the Middle East on 9 different occasions, which then was a big part of my training. When you get to speak modern Hebrew, and my knowledge of modern Hebrew is sharply limited, but I can at least tell the students, hey, you should go over and take an Ulpan, take a summer of Hebrew over there. You'll love it.